The hearing today is the fourth global warming hearing that I've held as committee chairman. This time we're going to examine the media's role in presenting the science of climate change. I have to say that, Senator Boxer, that we had decided to have this fourth hearing before the Republicans lost the majority on that fateful Tuesday. So we're going to go ahead and have this, and I'm sure that we'll have an opportunity to explore this much more under your chairmanship. Poorly conceived policy decisions may result from the media's overhyped reporting. Much of the mainstream media has subverted its role as an objective source of information on climate change into a role of an advocate. We've seen examples of this overwhelmingly one-sided reporting by 60 Minutes reporter Scott Pelley, ABC's Bill Blakemore, CNN's Miles O'Brien, which I believe is here with us today or will be, Time Magazine, the Associated Press, Reuters, just to name a few. There are three types of climate research. First, the hard science of global warming by climate scientists. Second, the computer modelers. And finally, the researchers who study the impacts. Rather than focus on the hard science of global warming, the media has instead become advocates of hyping scientifically unfounded climate alarmism. And I'm not the only one who believes that. Here are just a few examples of believers. Now, these are people who believe. Well, first of all, let's clarify what the issue is. I think all of us know that we're going through cycles, and we have throughout recorded history where it gets warmer and it gets cooler. We are going through a warmer cycle now, and I've contended, as many scientists have, this is due to natural causes. But if you don't believe that and believe that it's due to anthropogenic gases or man-made gases or methane, CO2, then you're in that camp. And so some of the people who believe that still believe the media is wrong in the way they've been reporting it. Mike Holm, the director of the UK-based Tyndall Center for Climate Change Research, a group that believes humans are the driving force behind global warming, chastised the media and environmentalists last month for choosing to use and I'm quoting now, the language of fear and terror to scare people. Holm noted that he has found himself, quote, increasingly chastised by global warming activists because his public statements have not satisfied the activists' thirst for environmental drama and exaggerated rhetoric. Second, a report in August of 2006 from the UK's Labour-leaning Institute for Public Policy Research also slammed the media presentation of climate science as, and I'm going to quote here again, this is what they said. These are people who are believers in the other side of this about man-made global warming. A quasi-religious register of doom, death, judgment, heaven, and hell, using words such as catastrophe, chaos, and havoc. The report also compared the media's coverage of global warming to, quote, the unreality of Hollywood films. Now, these are the believers we're talking about. In addition, NBC's newsman Tom Brokaw, the one-sided 2006 Discovery Channel, his one-hour program, a global warming documentary, was criticized by a Bloomberg News TV review that noted, and this is a quote, you'll find more dissent, referring to the presentation that was made by Tom Brokaw, you'll find more dissent at a North Korean political rally than in this program. The media often fails to distinguish between predictions and what is actually being observed on the Earth today. We know from an April 23rd, 2006 article in the New York Times by Andrew Revkin that, quote, few scientists agree with the idea that the recent spate of potential hurricanes, European heat waves, African droughts, and other weather extremes are in essence our fault, a result of man-made emissions. There is more than enough natural variability in nature to mask the difference. Again, we're talking about someone who generally would be on the other side. The New York Times is essentially saying no recent weather events, including Hurricane Katrina, is because of man-made global warming. Yet most of the media fails to understand this fundamental point and instead focuses on global warming computer model projections of futures as if they were a proven fact. This is perhaps the easiest scientific area for the media to exaggerate and serve as advocates for alarmism. Climate modelers project all kinds of scary scenarios. This allows the media to pick and choose which one they want to show and demonstrate and characterize as being true. I mean, you know, hysteria sells and people are out there doing it. Clearly, we cannot today somehow disprove catastrophic predictions of our climate in the year 2100. But if the observations of what is happening today are not consistent with what global warming models predict should occur, then we do know that what we do know is that our understanding of the globe is incomplete. The fact is, the biosphere is extremely complex and startling discoveries happen every year. This point was driven home earlier this year when the journal Nature reported that trees emit methane. Now, this is something that was brand new. They had not used the fact that trees emit methane. Methane is a type of anthropogenic gases, similar to CO2, affecting, if this does affect climate, it would affect climate. Yet the models didn't even have this. This is a great discovery. Trees are everywhere, and we didn't use this as the basic fact about our planet. It's unfortunate that so many are focused on alarmism rather than a responsible path forward on this issue. If your goal is to limit emissions, whether for traditional pollution or CO2, the only effective way to go about it is the use of cleaner, more efficient technologies that will meet the energy demands of this century and behind. And the Bush administration and their Asian Pacific partnership is right on target for this type of an approach. It stresses the sharing of new technology among nations, including 3 of the world's top 10 emitters who are exempt from Kyoto. We're talking about China, India, and South Korea. And China, by end of 2009, will become the world's largest CO2 emitter. What is disappointing is that the President's program gets more positive press in other countries than it does here in the United States. So the alarmism is not just coming in the media, it's advancing. They are becoming more desperate because former supporters of their views are now changing their position. Former advocates such as David Bellamy, Britain's famed environmental campaigner, he was one of the most vocal back in the late 90s on CO2 and man-made gases contributing to climate change. David Bellamy, and also Claude Allègre, a French geophysicist and a former Socialist Party leader in France, and he's a member of both. I don't know anyone else who has this in their credentials. He's a member of both the French and the United States Academies of Sciences. Allègre now says the cause of warming remains unknown, and alarmism, quote, has become a very lucrative business for some people. In short, their motivation is money. And I agree with Allègre, probably the only thing I agree with him on, that it is money. Senator Jeffords, what we did was recess the business meeting.
The difficulty with the quotations that the Senator was reading to us is that many of them were not from science bodies, they were actually from commercial organisations. That doesn't condemn them outright, obviously, but it means that they're not being produced by bodies with science credibility. And the second problem is because they're chosen quotations, nearly all of them are ambiguous. They may not be ambiguous in full context, but they're ambiguous as quoted. And that brings me to you, Senator Vonovich, when you say we're all here today to talk about global warming. Now, of course we are, but I'm astonished that there has been no attempt by anybody to tease that out. No scientist doubts that climate change happens. No scientist doubts, therefore, that global warming occurs from time to time. But what we're actually here today to talk about is not global warming. It is human-caused global warming. And that distinction, pedantic as it may seem, is absolutely critical in the discussion. And the press confuse that, not, I believe, by intention, but just because that's the way it is, because everybody knows we're talking about global warming, it means human-caused global warming. Well, it doesn't. To a scientist, global warming means the temperature's getting warmer. Why it's getting warmer, that's the question, and the degree to which the human contribution, and nearly all scientists will acknowledge there is a human contribution to that, but the degree of that with respect to natural climate change remains completely unknown and unquantifiable.
Senator Inhofe, thank you. The idea that, I think in terms of media reporting, there's been a concern that somehow scientists are afraid to speak out if they oppose the consensus view. And I think that's important to address here. And I can only speak to it in a personal sense, which is that my own career, I'm a tenured professor at Harvard, and I owe that success in my career partially to speaking out, going against my community on several hypotheses, And I was able to defend those hypotheses with observations, with calculations that ultimately convinced the community that I was correct. So it was, in fact, the opposition to the consensus view that actually gave me fame and is why I'm here today.
Good.
And therefore, I think it's very important to recognize that the motivation for most of the scientific community is not to just follow the party line, but in fact, if you can support those views, you are encouraged to speak out, because if you do so, you are considered a great hero.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Schrag.